In nearly 2 decades as a cop, as a homicide detective, and now as a crimes against children detective, I've seen a lot and I've done a lot. This podcast is not about me, though. It's about the dedicated detectives and law enforcement leaders who every single day are doing outstanding work all across this great nation. Let's reopen some of these cases with those involved to get an inside look at their investigations. You are listening to episode 003 of the Case Reopened podcast with Detective Scott Hodgins. I am here with part 2 of the Sharon Matthews case. I got here in the studio with me, Detective Victor Diaz with the Richardson Police Department. Victor, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Appreciate it. So we've talked in part 1, and we hope everybody listened to part 1. If you haven't already listened to it, I highly encourage you to do so. It's very interesting. But of course, it gives background to what we're going to talk to Victor about here in part 2. So in part 1, we talked about the beginning of the Sharon Matthews case. We had a missing child. Police officers went out there. There were certainly some red flags. The detectives were called to the scene. You all responded. Of course, there were multiple red flags out there. Throughout the course of the investigation, you were able to charge Wesley with abandonment and endangering of a child. However, the investigation continued as you still did not have the child. So last week we kind of spoke about a neighbor who lived back behind the Matthews residence who had a video system that the FBI was able to locate. Kind of go into what we were able to kind of determine from that point.
Yeah, so the video recorded all night. Got the spider in front of the camera churning its web, keeping that motion activated camera going all night. Get the enhancement so we can actually kind of see what's going on. And we see a vehicle leaving and we see a vehicle returning. And there's roughly a 30-something minute gap of time when somebody in a vehicle left the Matthews residence. And if you remember in part 1, I talked about finding Wesley's phone and him deactivating his shared location, which kind of coincides with that vehicle leaving.
Yeah.
So that those two things kind of line up.
Yeah. And of course, as we talked about in part 1, there was no mention of anybody going anywhere during this time frame. So, during your initial conversations with Wesley and Cini, as well as the follow-up interviews. What's up? Why is this car leaving?
Yeah, exactly. The one thing that people don't think about too is when you go out and canvas for video and with Ring and all the different camera systems that are out there now, it's not like 2002 where very select people and only drug dealers had cameras.
Yeah.
Now everybody has them. Mm-hmm. And so the amount of information that we were taking in was vast.
Yes.
And then you got to have somebody review it, and somebody's got to watch it to see, is there even anything on here worthy of any evidence or anything?
Yeah.
And, we ended up finding close to 5 videos that showed the Matthews vehicle on its path and what it did. And we can tell based on video, we put a timeline together of him leaving the residence, passing the Inwood Bank there on Centennial, turning into the shopping center there at Plano and Buckingham, passing the crab shed, going behind the Fiesta, hanging out back there for a couple of minutes, and then going back down Centennial, up College Park, U-turning back the other way down College Park. And it kind of gives us an idea of he's eaten up this 30-something minutes of time he left the house, so we know he's close. And then the backside that you don't see is once you discover that information, the searches and all the different things that come with checking all of those areas that we saw the vehicle. And, he went behind Fiesta and we thought, oh man, something's back there.
That's where the body is.
Go over there. And of course you come up empty and you're left with this feeling of, defeat.
Yeah.
And
how far in the investigation were you by this point?
By this point, we got to be probably 7-8 days in.
Yeah. So plenty of time to where, and all this has to be accounted for or thought about, but plenty of time for if there's a dumpster back there behind the trash can, that dumpster's probably been empty by now. And if we need to go in that direction, we got to contact the trash company and figure out where the stuff gets dumped.
So that's an interesting take that you bring up, because I mentioned in part 1 that Nick Mick sent us a rep out, and Henry came out And Henry responds to, I don't know if he's still working for NCMEC, but he responds to all these events that happen all over the country. And he shares his infinite wisdom about this with these detectives that are working this. And one of the things that he said was, hey, we need to figure out who's running trash service, what dumpster or what landfill it's going to, and halt all trash being dumped in that specific area of that landfill. So we figure all that out. We go to the landfill and we kind of tell them what's going on. And we're like, hey, can you, like in a general area, tell us more or less where the trash for this address is dumped? I mean, we can't tell you exactly, but we get pretty close. Well, I mean, how close you thinking? I don't know, maybe 3 meters. And so,
yeah, nobody would think there's that much planning and detail going into dumping trash in a landfill, but it is very organized.
Yeah. So we had them kind of halt trash dumps in that particular area of the landfill until we can determine that we didn't need to do that anymore, just in case we had to do some type of landfill, body recovery or something like that. So these little details that kind of get missed by everyday people that don't have the training and experience to work these complex cases. It takes a team. Yeah. And really without the insight from all these other people that work this stuff, you don't get to the end result.
Yeah. So y'all watch this video, y'all track him to these locations, y'all see him hanging out behind the grocery store, y'all start talking to the trash companies and going to the landfill. Where are we now?
So at this point, a lot of the search warrant returns are coming back to us. The Cellbrite or forensic downloads of the phones are coming back. We're analyzing the phones, the text messages, the search history. Search history on his phone shows that, they're looking up green vomit. They're looking up all these terms, these keyword search terms that are just in line with something happened to Sharon and we just don't know what, but why are you looking this stuff up? Looking at the call detail records and doing cast analysis on those records to determine, where did the phone go? Where can we track him to? All those different things are coming into play. And, we're getting to a point now where we still don't have a body. We're still doing cadaver dog searches almost daily in different areas and in different green belts and creeks and parks and everywhere else. Everybody's pitching in and doing every type of investigative technique that we know it's being attacked and it's being done. Yeah. And we're still kind of getting nowhere. Yeah. And we end up getting the results back on some financials, and we chase those down, and we end up finding out that on one of their credit cards that they had dinner Friday night. And so that's kind of like the start of the timeline. It's like, okay, well, let's kind of chase that lead down. Mm-hmm. We end up going to the restaurant where they had dinner and showing a picture of the family and trying to figure out based on the receipt if they knew what server it was. And they're like, yeah, based on the receipt, I can tell you who the server was. Track the server down, show him a picture. And I served that family on Friday night. So we show him a picture of the kids. And do you remember which kid was here? And he points to Shayna. And so there was no other kid? Nope, just the one. Wow. And looking at the receipt, there's adult meals and one child meal.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's kind of telling.
Yeah. And they had video there, but unfortunately, because of the time delay, it's gone now. Erased. It's erased, and we don't have it. Yeah. So now we're getting all these little peripheral things that are telling us that something's amiss, and we know we're getting close. But we're just quite not there.
Yeah. You're so close, but just not quite. You just need like one or two more things maybe to put this all together, but just not quite there yet.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think now kind of where we're at and, what we do next. And, I remember trying to go over all the different results and the videos and just kind of like trying to think of every investigative technique. I got to a point for the second time where I'm feeling like I'm just defeated and I can't crack this thing. So I start to think of major cases that have happened where there was no body and there was an arrest made, and then there was a trial or something happened to where you've got no body, but detectives were able to get to the next step.
Yeah.
So I started reaching out to some of these detectives and literally cold calling agencies in Florida saying, hey, this is who I am. I'd like to speak to the lead detective on this case. And within a couple of minutes, some guy's calling me back saying, hey, what do you need?
Yeah.
And, hey, this is who I am. This is what I got. Do you got a minute to hear me out?
Let's do it.
Have at it. What do you got? You know, give them a breakdown of where we're at and say, what did you guys do? Are there any investigative steps, techniques, things that you did that I've not done? You know, I'm at my wits' end here. And I learned a lot of great things from some of these very tenured people that had complex case investigations.
Mm-hmm.
And so we kind of put some of those investigative strategies into use. Some were helpful, some were not. But, you know, we threw them all out there.
Yeah.
And, you know, reflecting back on it, the crazy thing is, you know, to date, I think I've been called at least a dozen times by people that
Now
were,
you're the
that
guy
were,
that gets called.
that were in my shoes. And
Yeah.
they're saying, hey, you had that Sharon Matthews case. Hey man, what'd you guys do? Anything you can think of? And I'm kind of sharing my experiences with those detectives in hopes that they can advance their case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool thing about our profession is we can call up somebody from clear across the country that you've never spoken to before.
Yeah.
They have zero bearing on the case whatsoever. They might not even have ever even heard of the case, but they have maybe been in a similar situation or had a similar case, and you can, you know, feed from each other. You know? You can learn something from them.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool how you can do that sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, we're almost there.
Yeah, we're getting pretty close. You know, we end up taking and you know, the search of the house, we end up taking the cars. The car that we know is the car they used that night. We took that pretty early. We ended up extracting the infotainment system and trying to extract some information from it. But that was going to be one of those deals where you ain't going to get the results back right now.
Yeah.
So it was kind of one of those like steps that we did early on in hopes that it would have a payoff later.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we're getting to the point now where, you know, we've chased all these leads down, we've done all these things, and I think we're close to 2 weeks in, and we're out doing searches with the cadaver dogs, and we're all tired. It's been a long couple of weeks, and I'm talking to the canine handler that's out there with us, Chris, and we just start chatting up about the weekend and what's coming up. And I let her know that tomorrow's my first day off in almost 2 weeks. Jules is going to be on today. He was off, so we're going to rotate days off, and I get to enjoy a day off.
Yeah.
And
you got to get away from it. For, you know, even if it's just a day, you got to get away.
Yeah. And
at this point.
She mentions that she's gonna be doing some training, and I said, well, what do you mean training? And she talks about doing cadaver dog training, and I said, explain, tell me, what do you mean?
Yeah.
And she's like, we go out there and we hide a bone, we hide a tooth, and then the dog's got to go track it. We do our process for how we do our searches, and, you know, testing the dog to see if the dog's going to be able to find these remains.
Yeah.
And I said, like, so you do this with who? And she's like, well, with all the other cadaver dog handlers. And well, how many cadaver dog handlers and dogs like will be at this training? And she's like, about 6. And so I literally take 2 steps back, and I'm like, Chris, you're telling me there's going to be 6 cadaver dogs in Dallas tomorrow? She goes, yep. And I said, this is a hard ask. You guys have been running downhill for us, but could we use all 6 dogs to look for Sharon? And she goes, I'm pretty sure. I got to do the approvals and stuff.
And so
but
forth,
I'm pretty sure we would all rather work a real case than just training.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I called my boss, and they give us the okay. We have detectives come in to run with each dog. So at the end of this very long day, I go back to my desk at the station. It's now evening. I pull up Google Maps. I type in the address there for the Matthews residence, and I just start looking at green belts, parks, anything that kind of sticks out as a searchable area that we could look. And I put together a target list of about 14 or 15 different addresses, and I set teams 1 through 6. and left the instructions for Jules, made packets, and basically said, y'all, give everybody 1 through 6. First one that's done, go to 7. Next one that's done, go to 8 until you guys have hit them all.
Yeah.
And so that was the plan.
Yeah, do your thing.
That was the master plan.
Yeah.
And next day, I sleep in. Jules and the guys are hitting it. I go to church, and it's somewhere in the middle of service, and the phone's blowing up. And I'm Catholic. You don't answer your phone in Catholic church, let alone look at your screen.
Yes.
Know, it's very much hidden in my pocket. I finally step out. I'm like, I got to see what's going on.
Yeah.
I step out, look at my phone. Of course, I've been getting blown up.
Of course.
And one of the detectives, he says, hey, I think we found Sharon. And I'm just literally like feeling the chill on my neck. And I'm like, are you sure? Well, I'm not sure, but I'm sure. Like, I think we got her, man. You can come in. We're spinning everybody up.
Wow.
And so he gives me the address and make my way in. And at this point, we've got full-on command post, FBI ERTs en route to process everything.
Mm-hmm.
And we go to the culvert where Sharon was, and you hit it with a nice high beam flashlight, and you can see what appears to be the body of a small child face down in the culvert with about 1.5 inches of water just sitting in there.
Yeah. And one of the cadaver dogs pinpointed all this. Is that correct?
Yeah. And so I might have skipped ahead, but so like to give you some context into how this happened, one of the cadaver dog teams goes to one of the addresses. They start their search, and the dog kind of makes I don't want to say a beeline, but it makes its way to the lowest part of the ground. And then it starts tracking north, and it stops at the culvert, and it gives its alert sign, and the handlers, sitting there, well, that's the sign. And they call up and say, hey, I got something over here. And they say, hey, get out of the area and get off the X, and let's have a second dog confirm. So they bring in a second dog. Second dog starts in that same area. Second dog does the exact same thing.
Yeah.
And that was the first live remains recovery for that dog.
Wow.
And handler.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. You got something once you got not one, but 2 dogs hitting on the same thing.
Yep.
Yeah. They're pretty impressive.
Yeah. No, very impressive. I was absolutely floored at their capabilities.
Yeah.
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 So, at this point, everybody's in there. We got the command posts up, FBI ERTs, coming in to process this thing. And we've got media now staged across the street, and the cameras just keep getting more and more and more. And now everybody's talking about it. The news cameras are circling up. And so now you got to start thinking about those other things. Like, I need to get a canopy up that's tarped off on the walls so that people aren't videoing, this recovery,
of course,
all over the news.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget how it all played out. The FBI ERT group, immense respect for what they do. And, the team lead over that group is basically saying we need to crawl in that culvert and we need to do the recovery.
Yeah.
And a very brave agent steps up and takes it and says, I'll do it, and gets suited up and goes in there and pulls these remains of Sharon out. And it's 2 weeks later, and obviously you've got a lot of body decomp and different things like that.
Yeah.
And at that point, we pretty much knew.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So once you recover the body, obviously they had to confirm that's who that was.
Yeah. So we pretty much knew that was Sharon. Obviously, we had the autopsy the very next day. And with the assistance of the medical examiner and others, they were able to confirm that it was, in fact, Sharon.
Okay.
We had made a phone call that day to Cini and to Wesley's attorneys to let them know that, hey, we recovered a body that's of similar size of Sharon, matching the clothing description that was given of what she was wearing last.
Yeah.
There'll be an autopsy tomorrow, and we'll go from there. We specifically asked Cini to come to the station, and we had cropped a photo of Sharon at the recovery site and just wanted to identify, was this the clothes that that Sharon was wearing the last time you saw her? And she was just stone cold, no emotion, zero.
Wow. So telling.
Yeah. And so at that point, it kind of confirmed that we knew that she had involvement. As far as Wesley, we talked to his attorney and gave them an opportunity to come in before we do something. And they had a CPS hearing that next morning. And so the attorney called back and said, hey, we've got a hearing, but after the hearing, we're going to come in and we're going to speak. Okay, sounds good. So we prepared, did everything. Next day, after the CPS hearing that was aired all over the news because the media's all over this thing.
Of course.
All the news people following Wesley as he makes his way to the station. He comes in with his attorney and kind of entourage of people, if you will. And we're told that he's going to give a statement and we'll go from there. And so we sit down in the interview room and we do the typical read the Miranda rights. And in the presence of his attorney, he waived his rights and he went into his version of kind of what happened that night in October, where things kind of went south for him.
Yeah. So just to back up just a little bit, during the autopsy, could they give a manner and cause of death?
So the manner of death was, I believe, unknown. The cause of death was homicidal violence.
Okay.
As far as internal organs, there wasn't much.
It's hard when you have a decomp.
Yeah.
It's hard to get some of these answers.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So y'all brought in Wesley. He gives another statement.
Yeah. So Wesley comes in. We finish the Miranda. He waives. His attorney lets him speak. And he gives us his version. And his version is along the same lines of what he told us that first night. There's this battle of wits between drinking the milk and ensuring that she's going to drink the proper amount of milk. And they go back and forth. They go to the garage. And well in the garage, he's getting sleepy. She's getting sleepy. He's trying to force her to drink this milk. And, she's just not doing it. And he says that as she's drinking this milk, all of a sudden she starts to gag and cough like she's choking. And so he's literally watching as his daughters, they're choking, and to the point where she stops choking and she dies, and he
just
claims
right then and there.
just like that. And he claims that he wanted to call Cini because she's a nurse and she can maybe help, but he didn't want to do that, so he didn't.
Yeah,
and
God
then,
forbid he wake her up.
Right. And then he goes into, I went to hold her and she was very stiff, and he's referencing rigor.
Which doesn't happen that fast.
And rigor mortis doesn't happen that fast. And then he's talking about how cold she is. And typically it takes a minute for the body to start cooling off.
Of course.
So those things obviously don't line up, right?
Mm-hmm.
But nonetheless, he admits that, yes, that's what happened. So not knowing what to do and being in shock and all this stuff, he decides to take a blue recycled trash bag that Richardson residents get to put their recyclable items in and put his 3-year-old daughter in it. And then he puts her in the cargo area of his Acura along with the trash that he's collected for the last couple of days. And he puts it in the cargo area and he leaves the home, stops sharing his location because he doesn't want to alarm Cini. And he drives over exactly where we saw him on video, pulls in behind the Fiesta, opens the cargo hatch, dumps the trash in the dumpster there. And then he drives over to a street couple blocks down where he stops, pulls over, goes to the back, opens the hatch, pulls Sharon out, takes her out of this trash bag and carries her over to the culvert, lays her face down and pushes her back into the culvert until she hits something big, an object, something where he can't push her anymore. And so he decides we're going to just, this is going to be it for her.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So after he gave that statement, where did y'all go from there?
So, we wanted a lot more clarification on the statement, and we wanted to really lock down kind of exactly what he knew, what Sini knew, and all these different things. And one of the questions I had was going back to Friday, hey, you guys went to this restaurant. What's the deal here?
Mm-hmm.
And his explanation is that Sharon's not drinking her milk. She's not doing what she's supposed to do. So we disciplined her by making her stand in the kitchen while me, Sini, and Shayna went to go have dinner.
So you just leave your 3-year-old at the house by themselves.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And so given that, we asked him specifically about Sini and, hey, she's okay with leaving her daughter at the house, while you guys go have dinner. And he didn't really give any explanation to it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what happened when you got back? Because it's at least at a bare minimum an hour, probably more like 2.
Yeah.
By the time you leave and come back and eat. Well, she was standing in the exact same spot. Well, that'd be the first child ever to not move.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So obviously, when he's making these lies up or some of these lies up, he's not thinking them all the way through,
Right.
which is typical of somebody that's lying.
Exactly. And we used a lot of this information, and we ended up essentially arresting him that day again.
Mm-hmm.
And we arrested him for essentially the I'm trying to remember what the charge was now that we put on him. It was basically like death by omission. So basically he did nothing to prevent the death, and its elements of the offense are so much easier to prove, and the penalty level is the same.
Yeah. It's just kind of an alternative to the capital murder charge.
Yeah. And, one thing I forgot to mention that I think is important is, from the get-go on this case, we looped in the Dallas County DA's office just based on the complexity and everything else.
Absolutely.
And we were met with 2 amazing ADAs that helped us out on this case and were there to be our ear and listen and guide us and give us some guidance all the way through this thing.
Yeah.
I think looking back on it, I wish we'd do that a little bit more on some of our bigger cases.
Yeah, that's something that on our end we try to do on some of our bigger cases. Let's go ahead and get the DA's office looped in so we can get kind of legal advice on what we have, what we don't have, what we need, what can we prosecute, what can we indict on, just all these different questions that it's good to have the DA's office their involvement on. So it's a good point that it's one of the key parts of any big case is getting the DA's office involved.
Yeah. So we arrest him that day. He gets rearrested. At this point, we're still got a ton of work to do. There's still a lot of loose ends to tie up so we can kind of wrap this whole thing up. And if you fast forward just a little bit in time, we got a phone call from a lady that works at a doctor's office. And she said, hey, that mom that's all over the news every day, she's in our doctor's office, and she's trying to get medical records for her daughter because they're supposed to be going back to India. And I'm sitting here thinking, surely Sini's not trying to take off to India. Wesley's now been arrested for the second time, and he ain't getting out this time because he's got a high bond, and we got all this other stuff going on.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, it was Sini who was trying to get medical records for Shayna so that she can attempt to flee the country.
Mm-hmm.
We used information that we had, and we ended up charging Sini with abandonment and endangerment of a child with intent to return for the actions that happened the night that they went to On the Border.
Yeah.
And we got the go ahead and hook her up and put her in jail. And, at this point, Shayna, if you remember, she got forcefully removed. She's now in foster care with CPS. And so it allowed us to ensure that both of them were going to have to answer for what happened.
Yeah. That's interesting that she's, after all that's been said and done by this point, she just wants to flee the country. So so it's awesome that y'all were able to put a charge on her to where she could get hooked up. And then not only that, but hopefully as a condition of bail, she gets her passport and all that revoked so that she can't flee the country even if she is able to make bail.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. You know, they did do the whole passport removal from both Wesley and Sini. You know, a lot of the investigative follow-up after the fact, it lingered on for, you know, if people aren't tuned in to kind of what we do, and it's like 3 months of work after the fact, getting everything lined up and preparing for trial and trying to get ready that you don't leave any T not crossed and any I not dotted.
It
and
is a ton of reports.
Exactly.
A ton of reports.
Yep, documentation, ensuring that everything's kind of been done and there's a good paper trail on everything that we've done. And then it'll hold up its weight in court so that when we do get to that trial, he's not going to get off on a technicality on my part.
Yeah, it's an immense amount of work on a case like that to put it all together, and everything that you've done basically has to be put on paper. So they can be presented in court, and it just I mean, countless hours of videos that have to be reported on paper, you know, just so many different things that have to be, you know, put on paper that takes a ton of time to do.
Yeah. So one of the things too that is crazy about this case is this was one of our first really big cases where we had body worn camera.
Oh,
you know, body worn camera in 2017
kind of a new thing.
Was kind of a new thing. Like not everybody had it, and going back now in retrospect, looking at it, and have working all these different cases I've worked since this case. You go back to like, man, how did we do it before? When you were you were like basically going off of a police officer's audio recording of a scene with no video, and now here I am. I've got point of view video from the first responding officer, the second responding officer, the third responding officer, and everybody else.
And it puts a lot of things into context.
Yes.
Puts a lot of things into context. When you talk about emotions of the suspect and so forth. Here's the video. You can see it for yourself. You know.
Yeah. You know, one of the things we went back and saw is when we were searching the house looking for Sharon, just to do another passover, just to make sure she didn't hide under a bed or nothing crazy.
Of course.
You know, later you're watching the video on body worn camera, and Wesley's not doing any of the searching. He's following us behind us as we are searching the house. Because he knows where she is. And there's no need to search when you already know.
So he doesn't even pretend.
And so reviewing all this hours and hours of video and all that stuff, obviously very time consuming, but we get everything kind of wrapped up, and we feel very, very confident with a really strong case. And then things kind of fizzle out and die out until we kind of get to the trial preparation phases. So what happens when all this goes to court? So, you know, we go to court and we get the notification that, hey, it's coming up on the docket. We're going to start doing trial prep. And something that I thought was an amazing piece of advice, and I don't even remember who gave it to me, but they said, you know, here we are years later. Advancements of technology and all these different things have improved. There was a terrorist attack in San Bernardino that gave the FBI the ability to get into people's phones that we didn't used to have. The invention of the company Gray Key and getting into cell phones and the stuff you can extract. So we rewrote some search warrants for the phones based on new technology, and we redumped them. And we got deleted text messages, deleted search history, a bunch of stuff we did not have 2 years prior. And it all came to fruition in the trial. So we go to trial. It's like June of I believe 2019, and go through the whole thing. And Wesley decides to take the stand, which shocked us. He takes the stand and he gives a different account of what happened that night. And
so he can't even stay consistent with
he can't. And he did an open plea, so he was already guilty. This was just basically a whole trial to determine his sentence. And he gives this different version of how he scared her in the garage and that made her choke on milk, and he grabbed her and hugged her and was trying to stop her from choking, but she died in his arms, and all these things that just that don't make sense, and trying to dispute a medical examiner with their years and years of experience and education.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Yes.
Yeah.
So he did the open plea, which is basically he's pleading guilty. You go through this trial. What did they determine from the trial?
So the lead ADA on the case did a phenomenal job, and it's not just him, but his whole team.
Mm-hmm.
The whole group did a phenomenal job presenting this case, and at the end of it, there's no option but to say guilty. The guilty was already there, but in your minds, it's like, not only is this guy guilty, but he's kind of cold.
Yeah.
The jury comes back after a short time, and they decide that they're going to give him, I believe it was 35, 40 years, somewhere around there.
Yeah. It's, I guess in a case like this, it's kind of the only thing you have left is, to the guilty plea and the sentencing, to show that, justice has truly been served here. And so, in your mind, it's somewhat of a victory. You still have a child that lost their life, and that's always sad, obviously. But you were able to do everything you possibly could in your team. Everybody was involved with this case. Everybody was able to do everything they needed to do, or everything they possibly could do. And in the end, it finally paid off.
Yeah. The unique thing about this case was, we'd all worked homicides and all the different violent crime, but when it's a child, typically the parents are the ones who are there to speak for the child that's been killed.
Yeah.
And they're crying on your shoulder, telling you, like, get justice for my child, And in this particular case, it was a 3-year-old child was the victim.
Yeah.
And there was nobody to speak for her.
Yeah.
And you've got 0 family members that are even being cooperative. They all want attorneys, and nobody wants to talk to us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so dealing with that dynamic of the investigation, it's difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. So on the other side of things, now we have Wesley sentenced. What about Sini?
So Sini, she's been in jail since the time we arrested her, and the DA's office decided that they were going to end up dropping the charges on her, and they were not going to take her to trial. Initially, I took that as, did we not have a strong enough case, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, I kind of agree with the decision. The district attorney's office has a bigger burden to bear in regards to ensuring that they're using the county funds judiciously and appropriately, and putting their resources where they need to be.
Yeah.
The reality is, at this point, Sini was charged with a state jail felony that carries a max penalty of 2 years.
Yeah.
She'd already served 15 months at this point.
It's probably going to get time served anyway.
She had 0 criminal history.
Yeah.
And based on all those things, I can't even think of somebody I've arrested on a state jail felony with no criminal history. They got 15 months.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't happen.
Yes, it just doesn't happen.
Yeah. And so I thought that the decision was good. Like, she served her time. We can drop it and move forward and just go from there.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's very interesting case, and y'all did an outstanding job on this. I remember the news cycles. Obviously, I in my department was not really involved with this at all, but I remember it being in the news cycles. And I've heard you talk about this case on multiple occasions now, and it's obviously a very interesting case. Just from all the steps that you had to take, and the roadblocks that the family themselves were putting up, and the BS statements that you knew you were getting, but you couldn't quite you couldn't disprove them, at least not yet. All these different things, but in the end, it all came together. Y'all stayed at it. Y'all were relentless and finding the truth and getting justice for Sharon. And like I said, y'all did an outstanding job on this one.
Yeah,
so
thank you.
I appreciate you coming on today,
Yeah.
talking about this. I know you've got many other cases that you've been a part of in your career. So I'd love to have you back on one day, and we'll talk about another case.
All right.
But once again, thank you for coming on, and outstanding job on this case.
Yep, thank you very much.
All
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much for listening to episode 3 of the Case Reopened podcast with Detective Scott Hodgins. We will see you on the next one.